if you win a Grammy, if you're nominated for a Grammy, it's with you forever.
Yeah.
We know it when it's there, and I would argue that we also know it when it's not there. We know the truth. We know the truth. We know the truth.
Ever wondered what really goes on behind the scenes at the Grammy Awards? And how is the Recording Academy shaping the future of music in times of AI and digital transformation? Well, in this episode, I speak with Panos Panay, president of the Recording Academy, about the evolution of the music industry, the mechanics of the Grammys, and how technology is redefining creativity. So we'll explore what it takes to orchestrate the music's biggest night and the role of AI in the industry. Let's go. Panos, your career has taken you from talent agent to tech entrepreneur with, I guess, sonic bits, to being an educator at Berkeley, and now to the president of the Recording Academy. And we're going to talk about the Recording Academy and also the Grammys in just a bit. Now, looking back on your journey from all over Cyprus to leading the Recording Academy, which organizes the world-renowned Grammy Awards, what has been the most unexpected turning point in your career?
Well, first of all, Christian, great to meet you. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'd say the most unexpected thing that happened in my career is perhaps being here, being president of the Recording Academy. I think that if you were to ask me when I was 15 years old in Cyprus, to kind of envision what my future would hold and what I would be doing, chances are I would have told you that I would be a footballer playing for Arsenal, and certainly not being the president of the Recording Academy and the Grammy Awards. It's been quite the journey.
It's been quite a journey. And for those who only know the Grammys, the world-renowned Grammys, can you share just a little bit about, the Recording Academy? What do you guys do there? And, what's the mission of the Recording Academy?
The Recording Academy is a nearly 70-year-old organization, as you mentioned, Christian. It's known for its, I would say, primary product, which is the Grammy Awards. But think of it as an organization that ultimately is by creators for the betterment, advancement, and protection of what I think is the most important class of citizens, especially at this juncture of world humanity, which is music creators. The Academy has a membership of nearly 13,000, and it engages a number of activities. Obviously, the most one that we're known for is the celebration of excellence, but also very importantly, we are dedicated to education, to advocacy around intellectual property policies, supporting musicians through a charitable organization that we have, Music Cares, which certainly both recently with the fires as well as during the pandemic, which is now almost exactly 5 years old, the Academy stepped up to the tune of tens of millions to support and help music creators in need. And ultimately, for me, it's this community that we provide for creators that enables this peer-to-peer model to help advance, again, the joint interest that music people have.
That's so interesting because you have seen the industry from all sides, artist representation, tech innovation, education, and now industry leadership. What would you say? How has that shaped your vision for the future of the Recording Academy?
Well, if I were to look at a common thread throughout my entire career, that's been to create conditions and platforms that ultimately enable artists to grow and express themselves, connect with audiences, develop careers. So whether it's with my time being a talent agent, whether it's with Sonic Bids, being at Berkeley or at the Academy, all these organizations have two common characteristics. They're all in the music space in different ways, and they all help support artists in different ways. I would say that having a different points of vantage view for me has been extremely critical in ultimately understanding how to best serve music creators. When you're an agent, you get to work with artists, I would say in a very direct way, right? You talk with them every day. You are responsible, even back in the 90s as well as today, for probably the activity that generates the majority of their income. And I always had liked this hands-on approach, and you get to see the fruit of your activities very immediately, right? For those on the podcast who don't really know what a talent agent does, well, your job is to book live performances and tours for artists. And I had the privilege of booking tours and live performances for some of, for me, best artists in the world, like Nina Simone and Leonard Cohen, jazz artists like Chick Corea and Pat Metheny, and many, many others. When I launched Sonic Bids, it was a wholly different platform. This was in a digital space. It was in the early days of the commercial internet in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I got to work perhaps indirectly with independent artists. Sonic Bids had a membership of over 500,000 independent artists, over 30,000 events around the world, and we were a platform that connected artists with these events. We had over a million, I think 1.2 million gigs happen during the 13 years that I ran the company before I sold it. So understanding the needs of the independent community and being on the ground with independent artists throughout the world, I had the privilege at the time of traveling and meeting artists all over the world who were using the platform. That gave me a very different viewpoint. And then at Berkeley, I would say it was the most foundational component of understanding the needs of young, emerging creators. How do you create the conditions for them to learn, to connect, to dream, to imagine, right? I think our foremost responsibility is that create environments that make people aspire to be better than what they are today. And I loved my time at Berkeley. I was there for 7 years. I was responsible for expanding the college in different parts of the world, including Europe and the Middle East and China, setting up a campus in New York with the Power Station, which is an iconic studio. So even getting to experience that and having this dichotomy of on one floor having young artists learning how to create and produce, and on the other end having world-class musicians like Chris Martin and John Legend come to record at the studio at the same time. So I would say that my almost 28, 29 years between 1994, when I first got into the music business as a really an assistant to the person that owned the talent agency that I was at, all the way to becoming vice president for international of the agency, launching Sonic Bids, being senior vice president at Berkeley for global strategy and innovation. Those were stepping stones or bricks for me to come to this role at the Recording Academy.
Yeah, and you know it better than probably most of them out there. But there's no business like show business, and I had the, let's say, pleasure because that's something I've experienced firsthand. Whether being a supporting act for a major band in Germany or playing showcases at Music Expo in LA with Sad Bislas support over there. But the Grammys is a global spectacle on an entirely different scale. So give us some insights. What does it take to orchestrate an event of that magnitude?
Well, it's funny that you talked about Music Expo because I'm giving the keynote there on Monday. And I have a long history with Music Expo dating back to my days with Sonic Bids, where we were one of the first sponsors. And I even remember a very young Katy Perry playing a
Yeah, she
breakfast
was there too. Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
So we both go way back. Um, well, the Grammy Awards, I'd say a couple of things that your listeners probably are not familiar with. What you see on television is ultimately 10 of the 95 awards that we bestow. Um, and the process for the Grammy Awards really begins, nearly 5-6 months earlier in August, September, when the submission period begins for nominations, and then through a series of voting cycles, we have two of them, where, again, something your members may not know, because most award shows and most awarding organizations, they tend to be juried, they tend to be by the public. Sometimes you don't even really know who's making the selections. It may be a magazine, it may be by popularity, it may be by streaming. The Grammy Awards is the organization that it is because ultimately it is a peer-to-peer honor. Whatever award you see or you hear about is what it is because this is your peers in the industry, 13,000 of them, voting and saying, we recognize your output today in whatever category that may be, whether it's production, whether it's songwriting, whether it's performance. We recognize your output as what we consider to be the most excellent one this year. The end result of what you see on television, meaning the awards themselves, is a long process that begins with 17, 18, 19,000 submissions, that gets whittled down to 95 odd categories, 400 plus nominees and nominations. And then ultimately that results in the final slate of winners. But it's very important to note that all this is a very democratic process by which the membership of the Recording Academy, which are all music creators, these are not music people. Sorry, these are not music industry people.
Yeah.
These are active creators in the music space in the form of performers, producers, engineers, arrangers, mixers, mastering engineers, on and on. These are the people that select who gets a Grammy. The show in itself is a sight to behold. It takes hundreds of people to put it together. It's, for me, the equivalent of watching a Michelin-starred restaurant putting together a menu and then ultimately serving it and creating an experience that's unparalleled to anything else. As you can imagine, because those final nominations are really not produced until mid-November or so, and the show happens in almost always the first weekend of February, barring the COVID year. There's a very tight period of time to put the whole show together. So there's a whole lot of people scrambling throughout the Christmas holidays, throughout New Year's Day, if you will, to put the show together. And then the metaphorical and maybe a literal drumbeat, increases as you get closer to the show. This year, we were dealt with an interesting twist, which was the fires in LA, that caused me even personally to be evacuated from my home, from which thankfully I'm still in and I'm talking to you from, but I was evacuated for almost a month. So as you can imagine, we had about 16 days to reimagine, rethink, rewrite the entire show. So the show for us is ultimately a beautiful means to an even more important end, which is the mission of the Recording Academy, which I had described earlier. Yes, it is about celebrating excellence, but it's also being the foremost advocate for music and musicians. And we ultimately believe that music is the greatest lever that humanity ever created to make a difference in society and the world.
100%. And let's dive deep just for a moment in the process, because I think it's really interesting. I mean, how do you become such a peer? How do you become a voting member? Are you voted in to be a voting member? Is it based on your I don't know, achievements in the music industry? How does it work?
Yeah, there is a set of criteria that you need to qualify for. And I would say that criteria is put in place, and I'm not going to go into all the arcane mechanics of it, but you have to demonstrate that you are an active music maker over the most recent past in a specific category or area, right? So you can't be dabbling in a bunch of different things, right?
Hmm.
So if you're a producer, well, tell us that you are an active member of the producing community, because in the most recent past, the last 5 years, you have the demonstrated activity and credits that show that you've been doing that. Again, it's extremely important for us that the sanctity of the organization and the community, and ultimately the voting body that produces the results that everybody experiences, is one comprised of recent, active music people, music makers. You apply and you have to be supported by your peers, ultimately, that you are indeed an active maker. And then there is a process by which you are ultimately invited to join as a member the organization, which is an amazing honor, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You know, and we've been focused in the last few years of both diversifying and expanding the membership. Ultimately, we are committed to ensuring that this membership body, this voting body, is a true representation of the music world. And the music world is never static. It is always evolving, always changing. So whether it's in terms of looking at it from a standpoint of gender diversity, whether it's looking at it from a skill diversity, whether it's looking at it from a race diversity, a location, all this stuff is important for us as an organization, because you have to create the right mosaic, if you will, at the end of the day. So whatever output you're getting is representative of the modern day music community.
Yeah, and it's getting very diverse. Not only the people or the artists and the band themselves, but obviously also the types of music. Specifically, maybe if you look at it from the angle of, I don't know, artificial intelligence and the role of technology, but we'll get to there in a second. But I understood, and of course, it's a big honor to be part of the voting community. And how do they submit their suggestions? Is it just, I don't know, do they send an email? Is it a questionnaire, an online form? How does that work?
You mean for the nominations?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, in order to be nominated, that happens two ways. It's either through a member of the academy or by a media organization, which are record labels and I would say professional organizations within the industry. And you have to be compliant with the eligibility period for which that year's award show or awards are bestowed upon. So generally, that's for the duration of a year. So it's September through August or thereabout. And then I think this is the beauty of the award, that it's a fairly open process. And then the other criterion is that your submission and your music has to have been released for an eligible commercial platform. And
Hmm.
as you can imagine, that definition continues to change. And time to time, the organization updates what it considers to be an eligible commercial platform. 35 years ago, 40 years ago, it was very different than it is today. Again, I'm not going to go into all the various specifics. And again, there is a very deliberate, very thoughtful process by which categories, by which eligibility criteria, on and on, are continuously updated. We have
Yeah.
a body within the Recording Academy called the ANN, or Awards and Nominations. Again, this is a group of members that ultimately looks at awards categories, looks at, again, eligibility criteria for those categories, and continuously updates them. So you'll notice that over the last few years, for example, we've introduced new awards categories such as the Africa Music Performance category. All those go through a very deliberate and thoughtful process until they're ultimately introduced.
Got it, got it. And I mean, you must have seen it many times. What does it really feel like to win or not to win a Grammy? Is there any, I don't know, memorable story that artists have shared with you about that very specific moment?
Look, I say to people, I can hardly think of another honor that if you are either nominated for or receive it, it generally makes for the first line in your biography, or dare I say even your obituary as an artist, right?
Mm.
Perhaps alongside an Academy Award for film or a Nobel Prize for science, or the other areas that Nobel bestows awards. If you win a Grammy, if you're nominated for a Grammy, it's with you forever. So it's life changing. It's life changing in a number of ways. I would say maybe the most important one is commercially. We know that within 3 years of winning a Grammy Award, it can have a material effect with respect to your earning as a creator. For emerging artists, it can make a difference of over $8 million over that period of time. It makes a massive difference with respect to the audiences you're connecting with, and I would say that's your streams. I mean, there is a 4, sometimes 5-digit percentage increase of your streams if you're nominated or you win as an artist. On and on. There is a so-called Grammy bump that is well known that you get as an artist. But I would say, there's a lot of intangible things. What is it like for you as an artist? How does it build your confidence when you know that your peers, not some random public selection, not some arbitrary jury of 3, 4, 5, 10 people, but your peers have chosen you in that category to be nominated or to be the winner of that year's Grammy? Amazing, incredible.
Life changing, as you say. I can totally feel that. Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
It's life changing.
Yeah.
And look, we live in an era of cynicism, and I would say what I love about this organization and what it does is, you know, it's you give happiness and you give optimism and you give confidence and you create conditions for some of the most amazing individuals that have set foot on this planet to be able to take that incredible gift they have to another level. How amazing is that? It's beautiful.
It's beautiful, and it's all about human craft. And I think it's very interesting that all the discussions around the role of technology, specifically emerging technology in music, is gaining traction. I mean, we've seen first experiments on, I don't know, AI generated music. I mean, it's not there, of course. It's not replacing human craft and human ingenuity and human creativity for sure. But maybe there is a role for it, but maybe not. Google was very early in, coming up with some models that try to, of course, learn from existing music and then, I don't know, generate some MP3 stuff that's basically just patched together for sure. But AI generated music continues to evolve fast. There is, of course, you can write your lyrics with ChatGPT, and it doesn't have to do anything now with human creativity, but it's made up from it's made of human creativity to some extent. And there is many tools, basically, I guess probably multiple tools a day, I don't know, launching about AI generated music. Do you see it as a tool, as a threat? As what is your take on this?
Like everything else, it's both a tool and a threat.
Mm-hmm.
First, let me start by saying that as an organization, we are not taking an instinctive, knee-jerk, hostile approach to artificial intelligence and to AI as a tool. We know that music creators have leveraged technology for as long as there's been music
Mm-hmm.
to create art. I like to say that when some human found a bone fragment and decided to drill 3 holes in it and create a flute, that was technology. And then several or 10,000 years later, whoever decided to come up with a contraption of a piano, that was technology. I mean, arguably, that's an extremely complex piece of technology, on and on. So whether it's multi-track recording, whether it's the internet, whether it's broadcast radio, whether it's MIDI, all these technologies have enabled, or drum machines have really helped elevate in many ways human creativity. On the other hand, we also know that AI is a wholly different animal. It does things that no other technology has ever done. It can create things, simulate things, fool you into believing things that no other technology has had the ability to do. So I would say that, like all great technologies, including a pen, it can be an instrument of love or an instrument of hate. And again, I think that, being an optimist, I believe that it will be a giant lever and tool to amplify music and human creativity. But I also do believe that ethical guidelines need to be put in place so that as humans, as people, we ensure that it produces the outcomes that are the best possible ones and not the worst possible ones.
Yeah, and I love your take on technology, because yes, it's another technology. Is it hyped? Absolutely. Will it prevail? Let's see. I think it's an interesting conversation. Will there be, a category, for example, exclusively for AI generated music? I mean, right now, I think human creators are eligible, for Grammy consideration. But I don't know, is that something you're discussing, or curious to hear your thoughts on that?
As an organization, we're not taking the stance that you cannot use
Okay.
AI in
Yeah.
your creation. So you brought up the example of somebody using Chat GPT for lyrics.
Yeah.
You can do that, but you cannot be eligible for the songwriter category, because we ultimately believe that humans need to be at the center of that creativity. You can submit your song for any other category. That's okay, right? You can be a performance category. So if it's
Hmm.
AI who wrote the lyrics, but it's a human performing it, fantastic. The other way around, you can submit it for the songwriting category and have AI, provided that you're not, infringing on somebody's rights,
Yeah.
be eligible for it. What we don't, and certainly I don't predict that we'll ever do, is somehow create a category where machines are doing everything and we're recognizing that as excellence. I mean,
Yeah.
to be very
Yeah.
frank with you, I know that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to disagree entirely with what I'm about to say. You'll never get what I believe to be artistic excellence. Again, you may get technological excellence. You may get all kinds of other types of excellence. I don't think you will get what I would define as artistic expression excellence with a purely machine generated product.
Yeah. And our listeners may agree or may disagree. We had similar discussions also on the podcast about human creativity, human ingenuity, and some other business context. And we have both sides, right? We have agreement, disagreement on can it be true creativity, yes or no? And of course, I think even for artistic, it's a much harder question, because true creativity from artists in the past. I mean, take the Beatles, for example. One of my favorite bands from the times. I don't know if you just go to an AI today and tell it, well, come up with something new, ideate about a new emerging category like rock music or electric guitar music. I don't know if that's already possible, So yeah, I think
You can do incredible things with AI. I use AI. We all, I would say most of us probably do.
yeah,
And just like 40 years ago or 30 years ago, people would be like, well, I kind of sort of use the internet. And now it's something that's there. It's like water. With AI, it's the same thing. Many of us are like, yeah, there's always the early adopters. I tend to be one of those humans. I'm always an early adopter of anything. I'm a sucker for anything new. Um, but I also do believe that there's something elemental and fundamentally human in creation of art that cannot be fully interchanged by a machine created art. Art is truth. Art is is the ultimate expression of free will. And machines don't possess the truth, and they don't have what I would consider to be free will. I am sure many, many people will disagree with everything I just said. I am sure they can find about 1 billion examples of great music that they think is great that was created by AI. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
absolutely. And let's take a somewhat reflective, vantage point, Panos. If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice at the start of your career, with the knowledge you have today, obviously, yeah, what would it be?
I'd say don't stick to doing the same thing or even being in the same place for too long.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not somehow telegraphing that I don't plan to be at the Recording Academy for a long time, but I do believe that there is value in experiencing different conditions, different environments, challenging yourself to go outside of your comfort zone, um, and scaring yourself so that you put yourself through discomfort because of that change, because that enables you to grow and break through and continuously develop your skills, your viewpoints, your network, your assumptions. That if you stay in one place for too long, I think that just dulls it. I've been very fortunate. Now, I also would say don't go somewhere and just change every year or every 2 years. I think there's value in what I'll call being T-shaped. You got to
Mhm.
possess both depth and breadth at the same time. But I say this about many things that I do. The thing that I don't want to do is likely the thing that I should be doing. And I don't think that I knew that when I was younger. When I was younger, I had one ambition, and that was to create my own company and sort of stay in it and develop it. Right. My idols at the time were the Bill Gateses and the
Mhm.
Richard Bransons and old school music industry executives like David Geffen and many others. Michael Ovitz, who was the founder of CAA, and going even further back, I had a lot of heroes from history like Alexander the Great and many others. So I think my ambition was start something, build it, stay within it. I feel very fortunate that for any number of circumstances, I put myself in different environments, often being a fish out of water. When I sold my company, and I left after a year. When I went to Berkeley, I knew many people who told me later, like, "Oh man, we thought you're going to only last for like 6 months. You would just get tired of all these academics. You would get tired of, going from running a business to being in an academic environment." And I thought, "Huh, well, how can I change all my assumptions? How can I assume a new identity, shed an old skin, assume a new one?" And even when I came here, it's a very different environment. And I love that. I've grown to love that. I've grown to love the continuous discomfort.
And would the advice be same for all the emerging artists out there and creative people that wanna get a shot at the Grammys? What would you tell them, the emerging artists out there?
Everything that I say is going to be cliche. And maybe the one thing that I'll tell them is everything you hear tends to be true. Yes, it takes a lot of hard work. I don't know anybody who's ever been successful in anything that just hasn't had to work super hard. I'm sorry, but I really don't think that you can just sort of sit behind your phone or your laptop or what have you and just develop a meaningful, sustainable, long-term career in this space. Again, I am certain that many of your listeners will completely disagree with this, and they're going to point me to all the TikTok stars and the YouTube stars and
Yeah.
SoundCloud stars. I use the word deliberately, sustainable. Being commercially successful for a year or two because you're the next big thing on TikTok doesn't give you long-term sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be an Elton John, if you want to be a Jay-Z, if you want to be any of a Beyonce, whoever, you talked about the Beatles earlier, there's a reason why we listen to the Beatles music 60 years since they first came out, right? There's a reason why Elton John has had a half century plus long career. There is a reason why Beyonce has been a star for going into her third decade. That's a lot to do with hard work. And that sustainability doesn't just happen because you hit it big and you have X million or 10 million or 100 million followers on a social platform. I'm not negating that. I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm not saying that it is yet another tool, an important platform you have to leverage today to reach audiences. As a matter of fact, I would go as far as saying it's probably going to be impossible to have a career unless you do that, but it can't be the only thing.
Yeah, well, it takes discipline and consistency, and I think in that case, maybe discipline even trumps motivation, because you have to just do the work. It's like in all areas, and specifically in this area, because today it's much easier to become an, let's say, quote unquote artist than maybe 50 years ago. Again, because of the technology, and I'm not talking AI only. I'm talking all the technologies, all the digital audio workstations, and what have you not. It's just becoming much easier. But not to be successful, it's just becoming much easier to start and try and then release music and produce music. Not talking about the quality, for sure. And Panos, this has been such an amazing conversation. But before the conversation ends, we have a new tradition on this podcast, which is that the previous guest leaves a question for my next guest without knowing who my next guest is and what we're going to talk about. So there is a question for you. And the question is, with technology constantly evolving, what is one fundamental aspect of human nature that you believe will never change?
Seeking the truth.
Wow.
I think that the reason why we are attracted to great art, to great music, to great literature, the reason why we have human relationships, the reason why we exist as humans is because we are in search of truth. We know it when it's there, and I would argue that we also know it when it's not there. And I go back to my earlier statement about AI. We know the truth. We know the truth. We know the truth. So I do believe that all this technology, these are layers and layers and layers that either reveal or obscure the truth, but they're not the truth. It's something under them or above them, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably the truth is the best long-term strategy for everything and everyone. I 100% agree. Thank you so much for that conversation. Now, it has been very, very inspiring and also very insightful, because many people don't know, what's happening behind the scenes at the Recording Academy. Of course, speaking of the Grammys, but also all the other, endeavors and things that make possible for the creative community, for the artist community, and bring people together. So I hope, maybe we learned a little bit more about what you're doing and what the mission is, and the impact you're creating for the entire community. So thank you very much for that. And that's it for this episode. Thank you for being my guest. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Christian. I had a fantastic time.
And to our listeners, if you have not subscribed to this podcast yet, please go ahead and do so. It's a small thing, but it will help us continue to make the show better and better. And our promise to you is that we'll continue to do our best to deliver exceptional value at no cost. So if you're not already a subscriber, please go ahead and do so. Thanks for listening, everybody. Take care and bye-bye.